It's time now for Countywide, a special presentation of Yavapai Broadcasting News. Join Paul David and Kyle Benedict as they talk with our community's leaders, newsmakers, and people in the know. You'll hear about the hot topics that affect all our lives in Yavapai County. And now here's today's Countywide.
Welcome to Countywide. I'm Paul David. Great to have you in studio with us today. We're going to continue a series of talks we've been doing with Cottonwood Police Chief Steve Gazelle about homelessness and panhandling in the Verde Valley. Today we have Cottonwood City Prosecutor Mick Jordahl. Hey. Welcome to the studio.
Thank you.
And Court-appointed Defense Attorney Mike Shaw.
You got
Welcome
it.
to the studio, you guys.
Thank you.
The Chief could not be with us today, but I'm glad you two are here because we've been talking off camera, and it's really, ever since the Chief has been coming in and talking about the homelessness and the panhandling in the city, each time he comes in, we're hearing a little bit less and less of that going on in the city. And we've got a program that we're going to talk about today that you guys developed along with the Chief and a whole bunch of people. And I think that's where we probably should start out, is how did this whole program, what is it and how did it get started?
Yeah. Perhaps what we should start with is that we had been trying to deal with the problem even before this whole group of people got together. And the problem is that we have a number of folks that show up regularly in the Cottonwood Municipal Court because they have a lot of low-level misdemeanor criminal offenses. A lot of them are things like trespassing, criminal littering, these kinds of things. And we were finding that a lot of those folks were either homeless or mentally ill or a combination of those two things. And so the system had been bring them in. A lot of times there would be a warrant for them and they would be put in the jail. They would be eventually released from the jail. They'd go through the litigation process in court. And sometimes they would be going right back into the same living situations they were in before. They'd reoffend, they'd come back before the court, they'd go back to the jail. And this was happening over and over and over again. So what Mick and I had been trying to do informally is work on a program where we could try to get some of these individuals to get into counseling and therapy, to try to find living arrangements for some of them, and then have review hearings to check on them and make sure that they were doing okay. When the Chief stepped on and got interested in this same problem with us, he started making some contact with folks from the jail, with folks from some of the sober living homes, and he started getting a lot of people together to come to the same table that Mick and I were at, and we hadn't included a lot of these folks that were there. And it was much better to have a much broader spectrum of people that are all interested in the same problem and making the same problem a little bit better. And we started finding that, like we were talking about before the cameras came on, he and I are supposed to be adversaries in this process, but we started finding that everybody has a similar common interest in trying to improve this problem. As an example, one of the things I was interested to learn was that some of the sergeants and commanders out at Yavapai County Jail, they feel like the jail is not the proper place to be handling this problem. They want this problem to be addressed somewhere else. They don't want to overcrowd the jail with these small, non-violent misdemeanor type offenders. And so once you start realizing that everybody has the same interest, then it was much easier to start moving the ball down the field, so to speak.
And one of the huge problems is with that old model of just like jailing folks and for these low-level chronic offenses is to the taxpayer. I mean, enormous expenses to jail somebody. I mean, if you're looking at average costs of incarceration, likely somewhere between $60 a day, something like that. And then often people will be taken to the ER. And so there's hospital expenses, like if they're passed out drunk, things like that. So it's an enormous cost to the taxpayer. And then, of course, perhaps even primarily, there's a humanitarian issue. A lot of these lives are worth saving. So what we're looking at is identifying people with local roots that have a mental health history or may be homeless, and we're not looking at people just passing through. We're looking at people with the local roots here, and people who are suffering, and creating lifestyle sort of crimes that are, people that are out there sleeping in bushes and whatnot, and addressing the problem, hooking them up with the providers. And what we've developed is a system to identify those folks. And they come into the city court, they're charged with low-level misdemeanors. They may be identified by the police, by the courts, by Mike, by me, but it's somebody that's been charged. And then we hook them up with mental health. Number one, they have to be willing to agree to the program. So typically we'll hook them up with Spectrum, the mental health providers. We'll look at housing options, things like that, existing resources in the community, get them signed up for access, and then develop a treatment plan. And if they comply with those plans, then they can either earn their way out of a conviction or have their sentences significantly reduced. So it's sort of a carrot and a stick approach. And we've had some really great success stories so far in the month or two that this has been up and running. People will probably stumble in the program, but so far we've been really excited about it. Maybe Mike could talk about a couple of those.
Yeah, can we get a couple success stories? Because we had the chief and kind of talked about a little bit about them, but didn't want to go too much into it because he knew you guys were going to be here this week. So yeah, give us a couple of the success stories.
Well, we have a gentleman who is appearing in front of the court regularly with an alcoholism issue.
And when you say regularly, what is regularly?
He would get a charge. Basically, I had not seen him much at all, and then all of a sudden he had maybe 3 different cases in a month and a half period of time.
Okay.
And it looked like it was something that was going to continue to recur, because as soon as he would get out of the court and get one case resolved, he'd be doing exactly what he was doing that brought him to the court in the first place.
Okay.
And we're looking at things like littering, camping in public, or just basically sleeping in bushes near public buildings, even though he was trespassed from those
Again,
areas.
misdemeanor, nonviolent crimes.
And a lot of times it is trespassing. This is a homeless person who does not have a place to go.
Right.
So a lot of times he's going back to the place that's familiar to him, which is exactly the same place that the police have told him not to return to.
Okay.
So we're seeing this happen, and then what we did was, and the chief was very instrumental in this one, because he was actually able to get a hold of Angie Lozano of Angie's house to try to get a place for this guy to live, because what we discovered was the homelessness issue was the driving force, really was the kind of the chief problem that he had. So as soon as we were able to get a roof over his head, a place for him to go, and this sober living has some structure to it. They've got people there guiding him, giving him things to do each day, and also combining with getting him to Spectrum, because they were working on transportation.
Sort of like learning life lessons all over again.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they'd take him to his counseling and therapy programs and then back home. And so he got into a rhythm of doing this, and it's been about 2 months, a little over 2 months now, and he's doing incredibly well. We've had hearings for him where things have been going really well, and he is not having those problems again. Obviously not coming to the attention of the police, and he really has been cooperating and following through with his treatment plan.
And he's going to AA like once or twice a day. I mean, it really is quite remarkable, and he hasn't had a drink, and he acknowledges that if he drinks, he's going to die, and it's true. He'll freeze to death one winter.
We see that. We see that happen all the time.
Of course.
Yeah.
Sure. Right.
Yeah. Let's take our first break, okay? Cottonwood City Prosecutor Mick Jordahl in studio today, and court-appointed defense attorney Mike Shaw. Mike's number is 646-0369. This is Countywide. We'll be back in just a couple minutes.
Hey, you.
Yeah, you. Getting that college education, what are you gonna do? Graduate and take some office job? Be like everybody else?
Or will you dare do something different?
Like, be a teacher. You could be my teacher. You got the skills.
The smarts?
Yes, you. You could be the teacher I never forget.
That'd be cool.
Does that corporate job even have recess? What are you gonna make of yourself?
What are you gonna make of me?
Most party fouls, not a big deal. But if you decide to drink and drive underage, you could lose your license and your freedom. Underage drinking and driving, the ultimate party foul.
My name's Eddie Metcalf. I enjoy working in my yard, and I can't do that anymore because I'm missing most of my lung. They did a CAT scan of my kidneys. No more kidney stones, that's the good news, but we found a spot on your lung. That frankly scared the hell out of me. I hadn't smoked in 22 years. How could this happen to me? He said, well, you know about radon gas. Well, you know, I heard about it. He said, well, the second leading cause of cancer in America is radon. 22,000 people a year die from this. I literally left the doctor's office, got a test kit, put it in the house, and our result was 39.8. The upper limit is 4. We got to get this fixed. That was on a Monday, and on Wednesday, our mitigation system was up and running. Well, I think everybody should have their house tested. We'd never known we'd still be living there. I could get another tumor from it. But right now, it's changing my life.
Welcome back to Countywide. We're talking about the alternative sentencing program for mentally ill and/or homeless defendants. Cottonwood City Prosecutor Mick Jordahl's in studio, and then defense attorney Mike Shaw is in studio as well. Okay, so let's break it down. You kind of Mick talked a little bit about it in brief during the first segment there, but let's go with criteria for entry into the program. What is that?
Yeah, well, we've developed a formalized plan, and some of these criteria are flexible. You know, but some of the issues will be: does the defendant have local roots? And there should be multiple misdemeanor offenses they're all low level. They're all misdemeanors. Suspected mental illness or personality disorder.
How do you determine that? I guess suspected. You said suspected.
Yeah.
So if they're coming back and you're seeing them on a repeat basis.
Right. Well, a lot of it is, I mean, Mike and I have been around the block on these things, so have the courts. So, I mean, we, just as lay people, we're not psychologists, we're not psychiatrists, but, you know, we're trained too, and we can recognize certain things. So if somebody comes in and says, well, or they're charged with, say, trespassing in a particular area, and they say, well, I own this land, or I own 1,200 acres here, that's clearly a sign of delusion. So that's one type of case.
Gotcha.
And sometimes it's hard to tell, because people can just chat away and they seem fairly normal, and then something comes out is like, whoa, you know, where'd that come from?
Right.
And so those are signs. We have to look for signs and symptoms. But if we suspect it, you know, then we can send people over to Spectrum. They get more of an adequate diagnosis and a treatment plan. And then so that's one of the reasons we do it. So we look at also, are they eligible for access, or are they seriously mentally ill? Access is important because that's how we can get the funds to pay for the treatment plan. There are funds that are available apparently through the Affordable Care Act, where they can actually go into the jails too and do those assessments, whereas with access dollars probably couldn't do it. So sometimes when they get out of the jail, they have to go immediately to Spectrum to get interviewed for eligibility for access. So that's a crucial part.
Yeah.
As I say, yeah, that would probably be a huge part.
And there are other sources of funding. For example, if Spectrum determines that this person is SMI, which is seriously mentally ill, that's what that designation means. That opens up an entire additional source of funding for that particular individual. So it kind of depends on what they find that person to have.
Gotcha.
So then another criterion might be a history of homelessness too, and often we'll have people that are what we call dual diagnosis. They may be have substance abuse issues, but then there may be mental illness, and more likely than not, they're connected. You know, they're dual diagnosis.
You hear about that, sort of a self-medicated person. Okay.
I mean, of course. I mean, if any of us were homeless wandering around, I mean, the first thing we're probably going to want to do is numb out. You know,
right.
You know, I can understand that.
Yeah.
You know, I think anybody, you know, that has half
we
a
talked
heart,
about before the show. You said that you've encountered people that have been, you know, homeless since the 90s, and you know, they're just not getting help. I cannot imagine.
Yeah, we have a fellow, for instance, right now, Mike is representing him, I'm prosecuting him. We're working really hard with him, and we've got people involved, lots of people involved, whether it's from the housing aspects. Catholic Charities is trying to assist, and they do a lot of like lifestyle skills, trying to get people the benefits that they're due, things like you know, signing up for Social Security disability if they qualify. But this particular fellow has probably been unhoused since the late 90s.
I can't imagine that.
Yeah. Peaceful guy, you know, walks around town, and you know, we're trying to help him out. You know, commits low-level crimes again, littering, camping, trespassing where he's not supposed to be.
But again, this whole thing is all about breaking that cycle.
Yeah.
Break this cycle.
Right.
And encouraging these individuals to take advantage of the help that's being offered. And that's kind of one of the points of the program is that's the carrot and stick that Mick was talking about. If you take advantage of this program that's being offered you, there's going to be these benefits that are going to occur to you in this case. And a lot of them, even with mental health conditions, can understand that, grasp that, and are willing to participate, willing to go through the program.
Let me ask you this. Now, people with mental illness, you said delusional. I've done shows in the past where we have Catholic Charities here and some of these groups here and talk about, well, we have this program. But then you think to yourself, okay, are those folks watching the show right now? Are they listening to the show right now? These folks that need this help, and if they are listening in these shows, do they know what we're saying, and do they know which direction to go, and that's where they can go get help? I mean, there's some out there, but there are some out there that literally need somebody to take them and point them in the right direction. Am I?
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, the homeless population isn't sitting around watching TV in the morning because they don't have a TV. They're out there, so they don't know about this, and in fact, their mental wherewithal may not be such that they can even figure it out. They may hear about it, but forget it the next day. And part of this is getting people to court, getting people to services. With this particular individual that used to camp out near, passed out near public buildings, we had someone go pick him up at the jail and brought him directly to his housing situation. So that took a lot of coordination. Get the service provider, it was the housing, somebody from Angie's House went out to pick him up. He was released to this program. And this is pursuant to court order. So we're having Judge Lasota will issue an order saying, okay, he can be released to a representative of Angie's House and we'll take him to his placement. Because in the past, people would just get kicked out of the jail, which is, basically outside of, very rural area.
Yeah. It's out there on Highway 260, right?
Correct.
Yeah, right. And so they're just walking on the highway, and that's a recipe for disaster.
Often they'd wander back to the same place that they were in trouble from in the beginning and start, if they had an issue with alcohol or drugs, they'd continue that issue.
Here's that cycle.
Right, so big effort to break that cycle, and it's really dependent on the court issuing orders and for immediate action. It might be report to Spectrum, report to Catholic Charities to get lessons on life skills, things like that, and then the follow-up.
The follow-up is key. It's got to be key.
Yeah, this will fail unless we have adequate follow-up. So for people new to the program, it might be, okay, in 2 weeks, you got to come back and prove that you've done X, Y, and Z. And if you haven't done it, there's going to be consequences.
What kind of consequences are we talking about?
Well, it could be, it depends. If they just walk out of the program, then it would be, okay, well, we're going to revoke this. You're going back to jail. We're going to start your case up, and we're going to do the traditional model. In some of the agreements that we're going to do, they may have to plead guilty in advance, but we'll put that guilty plea in a drawer and not enter it, see how they do in the program. Well, if they completely fail and get kicked out of the program, it might be, okay, 90-day jail sentence, or, we can do that traditional route. That's a failure for the defendant and for us too. We don't want to see that. But that's the way, they need to know that that's hanging over their heads,
Okay.
Maybe I can explain a little bit about the differences between those two deferred prosecutions. So what Mick was saying is in some cases the defendant would actually enter into a plea to a charge, and then that plea would be set aside to see if he could complete the program and he wouldn't be sentenced for whatever that offense was. In other cases, you have folks that have such serious mental illness that they can't actually go through the plea proceeding because they can't understand their legal rights. They wouldn't be able to enter into a plea agreement in the first place. So when we have situations like that, we can still do a deferred prosecution where we get them into counseling and we get them to commit to keep going to this counseling, and then their case can still be dismissed on the outset. So it depends on the circumstances of the defendant which one of those two systems they're going to be in.
Okay.
Yeah, and so the traditional route was if somebody was incompetent, so like they can't even understand who Mike is, or what my role is, what Mike's role is, what the judge's role is called Rule 11. You get a competency hearing. And you have a psychologist interviewing the person, seeing if they are competent or not, and then a whole period of, well, if they're incompetent, can they be restored to competency? And that costs many, many thousands of dollars. And that's usually reserved for, and you hear about that. Sometimes people with mental illness, they end up doing very violent things, and that they have to go that route. But we're talking about, low-level, people that have never used like firearms or things like that. I mean,
Nonviolent offenders.
Nonviolent.
Correct.
Gotcha.
Typically, I mean, it could be low-level, assault type of things, but I mean, typically it's going to be, nonviolent or very low-level.
Gotcha. We have to take another break. You believe it? We're almost done here. We're talking about the alternative sensing program in the Cottonwood area. Stick around, Countywide. We'll be back in just a couple minutes.
Take a look under your bed. Find stuff under there? What about jobs? No? Now try your closet. Still no jobs? Just more stuff? Well, you really have both. See, stuff is defined as household articles considered as a group. Sometimes this stuff is no longer needed. Wait, no longer needed? That can't be right. Because remember those jobs you were looking for? Those are really needed. And they're the stuff inside your stuff. Our job is to unlock those jobs. And it starts when you donate your stuff to your local Goodwill. Here's how we do it. When you donate to Goodwill, we sell your stuff to provide job training for people right here in your community. So just by teaming up with Goodwill, you help create jobs. And isn't that worth parting with the leftover keytar from your 80s cover band? Goodwill. Donate stuff, create jobs.
Me and my boy Matt had it good. He had catnip that was off the hook. But one day, he brings a girl home, and she's allergic to cats. Every sneeze was a nail in my coffin. Now I'm in a shelter. It's decent, but they don't even have Wi-Fi.
Look at you. You're at the top of your game. You're unstoppable. Nothing can throw you off track. Wait, is that your car? Uh-oh. Yeah, I saw that coming. That will throw you off track. You're looking at around 10 grand in fines, legal fees, and increased insurance rates. Let's try this again. Smart move. Because buzz driving is drunk driving.
Welcome back to Countywide. We've got just a couple minutes left in the program. We were just kind of discussing during the break there what we could fill the last 2 minutes with, and we were talking about, I asked you, what about families? Because, I mean, there's probably families out there that know their loved ones are having some troubles. And then, Mike, you brought up a good point, and then it occurred to me, too, that some families have just kind of reached the last straw, and they want to help, and they have been helping, but they just can't anymore. What is kind of the first step for families if they know one of their loved ones is in danger of becoming homeless? Let's start that way.
And I would say generally, if it's a local problem, meaning a Verde Valley problem, a good place to start is by contacting Spectrum Healthcare. And the telephone number for Spectrum is 928-634-2236. That's the place to try to get the individual to go in for an initial evaluation and screening if they can, if they're willing to do that. Because Spectrum can help them get eligible for benefits that can pay for their care and treatment. They can diagnose them. They can figure out what an appropriate treatment plan would be. And then that person will know how long they've got to be in that program.
Okay.
And also another organization is Catholic Charities, and I have a cell phone number, the CEO. I better not give that out right now. But that's here in Cottonwood, and they do a lot of life skills trainings, for homeless people, individual counseling, and all that. In terms of the population that we deal with, there was one gentleman that we talked about whose mother didn't even know he was alive, hadn't heard from him for 5 years. And so now we're in contact with the mother. She's back in Iowa, and we're getting all kinds of background information from her. We're getting the public fiduciary appointed. So this man's life has the potential to completely turn around, from being unhoused for really 15, 20 years to, getting his own place. getting his life back together.
I love the fact that this is breaking a cycle, though. I think that's the key thing here is that it's going to save tax dollars and it's also going to save somebody's life, basically. So, Mick, thank you so much for coming in.
Yeah, you bet.
I
Thanks for
appreciate
having
that,
us.
Mike.
Thank
Good
you,
to
Paul.
see you. Thanks for coming in. You guys ever need anything, just let us know. All right.
Okay.
That is today's Countywide. Thank you so much for watching and listening, and we'll talk to you again next time.